In the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood of Elmwood, everyone knew Mrs. Harris for her calm demeanor and love for classical music. Her garden was a symphony of colors, and her home a sanctuary of peace. That is, until her new neighbors moved in. The Johnsons were a young couple, energetic and boisterous, often throwing loud parties that echoed through the night. One Friday evening, just as Mrs. Harris was settling in with a cup of chamomile tea and her favorite opera record, she received a text. "We're throwing a huge party. Deal with it." She read the message twice, her lips forming a thin line. Then, she replied with a single word, "Enjoy." The party was as loud and raucous as ever, and Mrs. Harris found solace in her noise-canceling headphones. But she had a plan. Early the next morning, as the Johnsons and their guests nursed their hangovers, Mrs. Harris set her plan in motion. She packed a small suitcase, fed her cat, and set timers on all her speakers. She left for a week-long vacation at the seaside, leaving behind a gift for her neighbors, an endless loop of opera music set to play at maximum volume, starting precisely at 8 a.m. every day. The first morning, as the Johnsons groggily emerged from their party-induced haze, they were met with the powerful strains of Puccini's Nessun Dorma. It was relentless, majestic, and incredibly loud. The music continued all day, echoing through the walls and rattling the windows. Day after day, the music played on, each aria more dramatic than the last. The neighbors whispered in admiration of Mrs. Harris's cleverness. By the time she returned, the Johnsons had learned their lesson. The following weekend, the Johnsons sent Mrs. Harris a text, "We apologize for the noise. No more parties. Enjoy your peace." Mrs. Harris smiled as she replied, "Thank you." She sat back in her garden, the soothing notes of her favorite opera gently playing in the background, knowing that harmony had been restored. Weeks turned into months, and Elmwood basked in an unexpected tranquility. Mrs. Harris's ingenious orchestration had instilled a newfound respect in the Johnsons, and they began to mend fences with their neighbors. They hosted quieter, more intimate gatherings and even joined Mrs. Harris for tea and conversations about music. One day, as Mrs. Harris tended to her garden, she noticed the Johnsons carrying a large, mysterious package into their home. Curiosity piqued, she waited to see what surprises lay in store. A few days later, an invitation arrived at her doorstep. "Join us for an evening of music and camaraderie. Your presence would be our honor." Mrs. Harris, ever gracious, accepted the invitation. As she entered their home, she was greeted by soft candlelight and the soothing melodies of a live string quartet. The Johnsons, with sincere smiles, explained that they had commissioned this special performance as a gesture of appreciation for her patience and wisdom. Throughout the evening, Mrs. Harris shared stories of her favorite operas and composers, enriching their understanding of the music that had once been her subtle instrument of revenge. The Johnsons, in turn, shared their newfound appreciation for the beauty of classical music, a world they had never explored before. As the night drew to a close, Mrs. Harris felt a sense of fulfillment. The once tumultuous relationship had transformed into a harmonious friendship, all thanks to her clever and gentle approach. From then on, the Johnsons and Mrs. Harris often gathered for musical evenings, creating a new tradition that brought joy to their corner of Elmwood, and so, the quiet neighborhood of Elmwood thrived once more, a testament to the power of patience, creativity, and the universal language of music. As the seasons changed, so did the dynamics in Elmwood. The Johnsons and Mrs. Harris continued to bond over their shared love of music, with their musical evenings becoming a cherished tradition in the neighborhood. Word of these gatherings spread, and soon other neighbors expressed interest in joining. Mrs. Harris, ever the gracious host, suggested organizing a neighborhood concert in her garden. With everyone contributing their talents and resources, the event promised to be a magical evening under the stars. Preparations were underway, and the Johnsons took the lead in setting up the stage and lighting. They even reached out to some local musicians who gladly volunteered to perform. The neighbors pitched in with potluck dishes, transforming the garden into a lively, communal celebration. On the night of the concert, the garden was adorned with twinkling fairy lights, and the air was filled with anticipation. The event began with a heartfelt speech from Mrs. Harris, who expressed her gratitude for the newfound friendships and sense of community that had blossomed in Elmwood. The concert featured a delightful mix of performances, from classical pieces to contemporary favorites. The Johnsons surprised everyone with a duet they had been secretly practicing, inspired by Mrs. Harris's love for opera. Their voices, though not professionally trained, were filled with genuine emotion and enthusiasm, earning them a standing ovation. As the final notes of the evening's last performance faded into the night, the neighbors lingered, chatting and laughing, basking in the warm glow of togetherness. Mrs. Harris looked around, her heart swelling with pride and contentment. The music had not only mended fences but had built bridges, turning a once fractious neighborhood into a harmonious community. From that night on, the Elmwood neighborhood embraced music as a way to connect and celebrate. Monthly gatherings were held, each one more vibrant and joyful than the last. Mrs. Harris's clever revenge had unexpectedly transformed into a beautiful symphony of friendship and unity, and thus, in Elmwood, the legacy of the maestro of subtle revenge played on, a testament to the enduring power of creativity, patience, and the universal language of music. As the monthly gatherings in Elmwood flourished, they became a cornerstone of the community. People who had once been strangers now shared a bond that transcended age and background. Music had woven their lives together in ways they had never imagined. One day, Mrs. Harris received an unexpected letter. It was an invitation to attend a regional music festival, where the organizers had heard about the unique musical tradition that had emerged in Elmwood. They wanted the neighborhood to perform and share their story on a larger stage. Excitement buzzed through Elmwood as the neighbors prepared for the festival. They rehearsed tirelessly, perfecting their pieces and ensuring every detail was just right. The Johnsons took charge of organizing the logistics, while Mrs. Harris provided guidance and encouragement. The day of the festival arrived, and Elmwood's residents traveled together, their hearts filled with anticipation. The stage was set, and the audience was eager to witness the magic that had transformed a small neighborhood into a musical haven. As the Elmwood Ensemble took the stage, Mrs. Harris began with a brief introduction, sharing their journey and the power of music to bring people together. The performance that followed was nothing short of enchanting. Each piece told a part of their story, from the initial discord to the harmonious unity they had achieved. The audience was captivated, moved by the authenticity and passion of the Elmwood performers. When the final notes faded, the crowd erupted in applause, cheering and celebrating the remarkable journey of this close-knit community. Back in Elmwood, life resumed with a renewed sense of purpose and joy. The festival had not only showcased their talents, but also reinforced the strength of their bonds. The monthly gatherings continued, now enriched by new friends and collaborators who had been inspired by their story. Mrs. Harris, sitting in her garden with a contented smile, reflected on how a single act of cleverness had blossomed into a legacy of unity and harmony. The Johnsons, now her dear friends, often joined her for tea, sharing laughter and music under the same sky, and so, Elmwood's story of the maestro of subtle revenge became a cherished tale, reminding everyone of the extraordinary power of creativity, patience, and the universal language of music to transform lives and communities. As Elmwood basked in the glow of their triumph at the regional music festival, their story continued to unfold in ways they had never imagined. The neighborhood's musical journey had not only united them but had also inspired other communities to embrace the power of music. In the months that followed, Elmwood became a beacon of harmony and creativity. Neighboring towns began to reach out, seeking to understand the magic behind their success. Mrs. Harris, ever the humble maestro, opened her doors and shared her wisdom with anyone willing to listen. She hosted workshops and gatherings, teaching others the art of community building through music. The Johnsons, who had once been the source of discord, now played a pivotal role in these efforts. They organized events, coordinated with musicians, and even started a music appreciation club. Their home, once known for its loud parties, had transformed into a hub of musical exploration and learning. One day, Mrs. Harris received a letter from the mayor's office. It was an invitation to speak at a prestigious conference on community building. The event, attended by leaders and visionaries from around the world, sought to explore innovative ways to foster unity and cooperation. Mrs. Harris, though initially hesitant, accepted the invitation, recognizing the importance of sharing Elmwood's story. As she stood before the audience, Mrs. Harris spoke with eloquence and grace. She recounted the challenges and triumphs of Elmwood, highlighting the transformative power of patience, creativity, and music. Her speech was met with a standing ovation, and she was approached by numerous attendees eager to implement similar initiatives in their own communities. Back in Elmwood, life continued to flourish. The monthly gatherings evolved into more elaborate events, featuring collaborations with artists, poets, and performers from across the region. The neighborhood's garden concerts became renowned, attracting visitors who marveled at the unity and joy that radiated from the community. Mrs. Harris, now considered a local legend, remained a guiding presence. She continued to nurture the bonds within Elmwood, always finding new ways to inspire and connect. The Johnsons, along with their fellow neighbors, cherished the sense of belonging that had blossomed in their midst. One evening, as the sun set over Elmwood, Mrs. Harris received a surprise visit. It was a young musician, inspired by Elmwood's story, who had traveled from afar to seek her mentorship. He shared his dreams of using music to bring people together in his own community, and Mrs. Harris saw a reflection of her younger self in his eyes. With a warm smile, she invited him in, eager to share her knowledge and passion. As they sat in her garden, surrounded by the melodies of nature and the echoes of past concerts, Mrs. Harris realized that the legacy of the maestro of subtle revenge was far from over. It would continue to ripple through the lives of those who believed in the transformative power of music and community. And so, Elmwood's story of harmony and unity spread far and wide, touching hearts and inspiring change in countless communities. The neighborhood, once divided, had become a shining example of what could be achieved when people came together with patience, creativity, and a shared love for the universal language of music. The story of Elmwood and its musical transformation spread beyond the boundaries of their small neighborhood, captivating the hearts and minds of people far and wide. Requests for visits, interviews, and collaborations poured in from towns and cities around the region, all eager to learn from the remarkable journey of Mrs. Harris and her neighbors. One particularly memorable visit was from a renowned music historian, Dr. Evelyn Cooper, who was writing a book on the impact of music on communities. Dr. Cooper spent several days in Elmwood, immersing herself in the neighborhood's culture and attending their musical gatherings. She was deeply moved by the genuine connections and the harmonious spirit that permeated the community. During one of the gatherings, Dr. Cooper approached Mrs. Harris with an idea. She proposed creating a documentary that would capture the essence of Elmwood's transformation, showcasing the power of music to foster unity and change. Mrs. Harris, always looking for ways to inspire others, agreed wholeheartedly. The documentary team arrived, and Elmwood became a buzzing hive of activity. The neighbors embraced the project with enthusiasm, sharing their personal stories, challenges, and triumphs. The Johnsons, in particular, were candid about their journey from being the source of noise to becoming integral members of the musical community. As the cameras rolled, the documentary captured the magic of Elmwood's gatherings, the laughter, the music, and the palpable sense of togetherness. Mrs. Harris's interviews were a highlight, her wisdom and grace shining through as she spoke about the importance of patience, creativity, and the universal language of music. The documentary, titled Harmonious Hearts, The Elmwood Symphony, premiered at a local film festival. The entire neighborhood gathered to watch their story unfold on the big screen, their hearts swelling with pride and emotion. The film received critical acclaim, touching audiences with its poignant message of hope and unity. Following the success of the documentary, Elmwood received invitations to perform at various cultural festivals and events. The neighbors, now seasoned performers, reveled in the opportunity to share their music and their story with the world. Each performance was a celebration of their journey, a testament to the bonds they had forged and the harmony they had achieved. As the years passed, Elmwood continued to evolve, always finding new ways to connect and inspire. Mrs. Harris, now a beloved figure in the world of community building and music, often received letters from people who had been touched by Elmwood's story. She responded to each one with warmth and encouragement, knowing that the ripple effect of their journey would continue to spread. One particularly touching letter came from a young girl named Lily, who lived in a distant city. Lily wrote about how she had felt lonely and disconnected in her large, bustling neighborhood. Inspired by Elmwood's story, she had started a small music club in her community, bringing people together and creating a sense of belonging. Mrs. Harris invited Lily to visit Elmwood, and the young girl was thrilled to meet the people who had inspired her. During her visit, Lily performed a beautiful piano piece at one of the gatherings, her music a heartfelt tribute to the power of community. Mrs. Harris watched with pride, knowing that Elmwood's legacy would continue to inspire and uplift. In the twilight of her years, Mrs. Harris often sat in her garden, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and music. The once solitary space had become a vibrant hub of connection and creativity, a living testament to the power of patience, ingenuity, and the universal language of music. She knew that Elmwood's story was far from over and that its melody would continue to resonate in the hearts of those who believed in the transformative power of harmony and unity. As the years went by, Elmwood's story continued to unfold, each chapter more vibrant and inspiring than the last. The monthly gatherings evolved into grander events, each one a testament to the community's unwavering commitment to unity and harmony. The garden concerts, once an intimate affair, now attracted visitors from far and wide, eager to experience the magic of Elmwood firsthand. One summer evening, as the sun cast a golden glow over the neighborhood, the residents of Elmwood prepared for their most ambitious event yet, a regional music festival celebrating the power of community. The festival, aptly named Symphony of Unity, promised to be a spectacle of music, art, and connection. The preparations were extensive, with every neighbor contributing their skills and talents. The Johnsons took charge of logistics, ensuring that every detail was meticulously planned. Mrs. Harris, now affectionately known as the matriarch of melody, curated the festival's lineup, inviting musicians and performers who shared Elmwood's passion for music as a unifying force. As the festival day dawned, Elmwood was transformed into a lively tapestry of sound and color. Stages were set up in parks and gardens, each one hosting a diverse array of performances. The air was filled with the melodies of string quartets, jazz bands, folk singers, and more, creating a harmonious symphony that resonated through the streets. The festival attracted attendees from all over the region, each one eager to be part of the celebration. families strolled through the neighborhood, children danced to the rhythms, and friends gathered to share stories and laughter. The sense of community was palpable, a living testament to the power of music to bring people together. Mrs. Harris stood at the main stage, her heart swelling with pride as she looked out at the crowd. She took a moment to reflect on how far Elmwood had come, from a neighborhood of discord to a beacon of unity. As the festival's opening ceremony began, she stepped forward to address the audience. "Welcome, friends and neighbors, to the Symphony of Unity," she began, her voice steady and warm. "Today, we celebrate not just music, but the bonds that bring us together. In Elmwood, we have discovered that harmony is not just a musical term, but a way of life." Her words were met with applause and cheers, and as the first performance began, Mrs. Harris felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The festival was a resounding success, each performance a testament to the diverse talents and shared values of the community. As the day turned to night, the festival continued under the twinkling stars. The grand finale was a collaborative performance featuring musicians from Elmwood and beyond, a symphony of voices and instruments that filled the air with joy and unity. The success of the Symphony of Unity solidified Elmwood's reputation as a model of community building through music. The story of their transformation was featured in newspapers, magazines, and even a special segment on national television. People from all over the country reached out, inspired by Elmwood's journey and eager to learn from their experiences. Mrs. Harris, though humbled by the recognition, remained focused on her mission. She continued to host workshops, mentor young musicians, and foster connections both within Elmwood and beyond. The Johnsons, too, embraced their roles as community leaders, organizing events and initiatives that further strengthened the neighborhood's bonds. One winter evening, as snow gently blanketed the streets, Elmwood held a special holiday concert. The neighbors gathered in the warmth of Mrs. Harris's home, where a grand piano stood by the fireplace. The concert was a cozy, intimate affair, filled with laughter, music, and the spirit of the season. As the night drew to a close, Mrs. Harris sat by the fire, a contented smile on her face. She looked around at her neighbors, now friends and family, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and sometimes challenging, but the rewards were immeasurable. Elmwood's story of the maestro of subtle revenge had become a legacy of harmony, a living testament to the transformative power of music and community. And as the notes of the final song lingered in the air, Mrs. Harris knew that their symphony would continue to play on, touching hearts and inspiring change for generations to come. In the heart of winter, Elmwood thrived in ways its residents had never imagined. The holiday concert, with its warmth and laughter, was a testament to the enduring bonds that music had helped create. Mrs. Harris looked around her cozy living room, filled with friends and neighbors, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As the snow continued to fall gently outside, Mrs. Harris shared a final story with her guests. She spoke of her early days in Elmwood, the challenges she faced, and how a single clever act of revenge had blossomed into a symphony of unity. The neighbors listened intently, their eyes reflecting the glow of the fireplace. When she finished, there was a moment of reflective silence, followed by a standing ovation. The neighbors, one by one, shared their own stories of how music had transformed their lives, bringing them closer together and creating a sense of belonging that went beyond mere proximity. The Johnsons, who had become dear friends of Mrs. Harris, stood up to speak. They expressed their heartfelt thanks to Mrs. Harris for her patience, wisdom, and unwavering belief in the power of community. They announced that they had decided to establish a scholarship fund in her name to support young musicians in their region, ensuring that her legacy would continue to inspire future generations. Moved by their gesture, Mrs. Harris thanked them warmly, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. She knew that the scholarship fund would provide countless opportunities for young talents to explore their passions and bring people together through music. The evening concluded with a final performance, a beautiful rendition of Mrs. Harris's favorite opera aria, sung by the very musicians who had once been strangers but were now family. The notes soared through the room, wrapping everyone in a blanket of harmony and connection. In the days that followed, the story of Elmwood's transformation continued to resonate. The scholarship fund flourished, attracting donors and supporters from all corners of the region. Young musicians who benefited from the fund often visited Elmwood, sharing their talents and adding new threads to the rich tapestry of the community. As the seasons turned and years passed, Mrs. Harris remained a guiding light in Elmwood. Her garden concerts continued to be a beloved tradition, a reminder of the power of creativity, patience, and the universal language of music. She watched with pride as new generations embraced the values she had championed, carrying forward the legacy of unity and harmony. One spring morning, as Mrs. Harris tended to her vibrant garden, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Lily, now a young woman, who had once written to Mrs. Harris about her struggles with loneliness. Lily had grown into a confident and accomplished musician, and she had come to express her gratitude in person. With a bouquet of flowers in hand, Lily spoke of how Mrs. Harris's story had inspired her to transform her own community. She shared tales of the music club she had founded, the friendships she had built, and the joy she had found in bringing people together through music. Mrs. Harris embraced Lily, her heart filled with pride and joy. She knew that the seeds of harmony she had planted in Elmwood had taken root far beyond its borders. The legacy of the maestro of subtle revenge had become a living symphony, playing on in the hearts of all who believed in the transformative power of music and community. And so, Elmwood continued to thrive, a beacon of unity and creativity. The story of their journey, from discord to harmony, became a timeless tale, inspiring countless communities to find their own melodies of togetherness. Mrs. Harris, the matriarch of melody, lived out her days surrounded by the music and love she had helped create, her spirit forever woven into the symphony of Elmwood.